If you see this behind me and you think to yourself, wow, he finally got rid of that old piece of junk Buffalo drill press that didn't have a lift on it and moved up to this new drill press with a lift on it, you are absolutely wrong. I picked this guy up for a friend of mine who needs a drill press. Before I give it to him, I wanted to take the time to clean it up, make it all nice so that when he finally gets it, it's a treat for him to start using right away. First, we need our bucket for our spare parts. All right, things that I want to fix on this thing before I give to him that I don't know how to fix yet are these plastic handles. It's got some looseness to it, I think, that I can tighten up just by tightening up the screws that are available to me. I want it to be nice, and I want it to be just a treat for him to use. I'll end up taking everything apart and I'll clean each piece individually, and then I'll put it back together and making sure that everything's clean as I put it back together. The thing is, all of this looks almost original. I'd say back when this thing was made in 70s, 80s, I think. I don't really know for sure. It was probably average quality for what you could find back then. But however, by today's standards, this thing is significantly nicer than what you can buy. I think I picked this one up for $100, and it was I think it was a steal in the condition that it was in. The guy was a nice older gentleman who just had it and taken care of it, and I was tickled to death to get a hold of one of these, just because I have a Buffalo over there, and again, when that thing was made, it was probably average quality. I don't want to say low. I don't want to admit that I'd buy anything of low quality. However, I do. What are the chances that these are standard? Not a chance. $13. Yep, these are closest to a 12. I might convert these. We'll see. The only annoying thing about this whole project, seems as though everything's in metric. This guy, you know what? So it needs to be bent back, so we're going to bend this right now. Well, you can see that right there. Sorry about the nicked up paint, buddy, but I think this is going to serve you better. Oh, that came off a lot easier than I expected. I don't know if that's good or bad. Have a little magnetic reach tool, which would be perfect just to pull this guy out of there. But my neighbor's currently using it right now, and he's been using it for the past 6 months. Cool. So that's a taper fit. So I didn't know that, but I got lucky, and just by tapping it, it released that. You can do that sometimes if you've got pressed in ball joints that are tapered or things like that. Sometimes you can get lucky and just bang it on the side really, really hard. It comes right out. I got lucky. Another thing my buddy really likes are grease fittings. So what I might end up doing is put myself a couple grease fittings in here so that when he gets around wanting something that works nice and smooth, all he's got to do is put a dab of grease in it. Man, this is cool. It's so simple. Cool. Man, this thing is cool. I almost don't want to give it back. Well, I almost don't want to give it. Moving red on the top, or I'm sorry, red on the bottom, black on top. And green. This is
replace these grommets. They look a little worn.
Let me tell you something. By no means did this actually make sense for me to take this apart. It ran just fine. Could have used just a little bit of cleanup. Most likely not the amount of cleanup or extent to cleanup that I'm doing. But I enjoy this kind of thing, and I want to make sure that my buddy's got plenty of years of use out of this thing before it gives him troubles. All right. All right, here are all the parts we got to put back together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with each section and put that section together before I start another one. The first thing I'm going to start with is the lift. And as I put the lift together, I'll show you guys each different thing I did to meet what I know about my buddy. He likes to be able to have the ability to abuse things if he needs to, and then also he likes grease fittings. So, buddy, you got a grease fitting where there wasn't one before, just for you. But anyways, let's get started. Here was the old set screw that was in there, and it's a little worn away, and what I found out was this was actually a 1/4 thread. So I thought about what would be best for this to mount to this. Now I know my buddy, he's going to want to tighten things up from time to time, so I thought maybe I'll put myself a grade 5 screw in here, but it really kind of looks ungangly looking. It's not as professional. So if he wants to do it in the future, I think I'll let him. Then I look for one of my brand new set screws in my pile of hardware. I found one, but as I was looking, I found this cool little one. We're going to call this a nylon locking set screw because it's got a little bit of plastic in there to keep this thing from backing out. And it's my hope that when I tighten this thing down, it won't move. So that's the one we're going to use. And it's my trusty 1/8 inch size Allen key that fits that. And then, as I said before, he gets a Zerk fitting here because I know he likes grease fittings, and then that's going to go straight onto this worm gear, which is then going to drive this spur gear, which then drives the rack, which elevates the table up and down. And anywhere where I'm going to have metal to metal contact, I'm using this machine, sewing machine oil, because it's real lightweight and the stuff doesn't dry too bad. So what I mean by that is sometimes when you put together parts, when the oil dries, it produces like a film on it, and that film discolors, and then it makes the parts that are sticking together, the parts that it's trying to keep lubed, stick together. When sewing machine oil is very light and it doesn't dry very easily, which is why they use it on sewing machines, because as you can imagine, if you had a sewing machine and all that oil was sticking together, then obviously it ain't gonna work. you ain't gonna have a sewing machine, you ain't gonna be able to wear that new dress to the prom or whatnot. So as I put this thing together, I'm also going to put grease where I'm going to pre-lube it with grease where it does need grease. So I'm going to put some grease on here is what I'm saying. And to do that, I bought some fancy grease from Lucas Oil. It's a spray stuff just for time. I think I'm going to put a washer right here just to keep these two parts. Well, no, it'll probably be okay. No, I'm going to put a washer. Where this is going to be used is a very humid climate, so anywhere I put oil, I'm also trying to prevent any type of rust. It's going to happen because of how humid the place is that this thing's going, but if I can help prevent a little bit of it, that'll help. All right, here's the head. So I think the first thing I'll do is I'll put the electronics in, and then from there we'll start with the rest of the stuff. Cool thing about putting this whole thing together after taking it apart was it was very self-explanatory. Each one of these pieces had a spot where it's supposed to go. And they didn't reuse a ton of the hardware all over the place. A lot of newer things. They use the screw that they've got instead of using the exact screw that's needed. Oh, and one of the things I like about that is, you know, like that screw, the screw that you pick up only goes to one certain spot on the whole machine. So you can almost put something together without knowing exactly where everything is supposed to go by process of elimination. Not saying that's the preferred technique, but you could do it. And now let's see if my little tape trick is going to work. There we go. Alright, I had to cut the camera there for a minute to review some footage on how I had wired this back, and then I got the multimeter out just to check myself to make sure that one, it's not going to shock my buddy when he goes to use it, and then two, it actually works. I guess being the key to a drill press, you want it to work, you don't want it to shock you. Depends on your perspective there, but man, look how clean this thing is. Like somehow, and I know as soon as I say this is going to happen, but somehow there are no like scratch. There's like one tiny little scratch right there, but like there's no scratches on this thing at all. This is amazing. This thing is a treat to put back together, I'll tell you what. All right, next thing I'm going to put is the motor tensioning mechanism back in here. If we can't get a better shot of this.
And then, I don't know if you can see that, buddy. That's as good as I can get it, so it doesn't look like it's got too much cancer. Plastic cancer, that is. What a thing. Twist it on there, just like that. And we're going to move to the front.
And in this one, this fellow I took completely apart. Gunk that was in there has gotten out. And I will add that there wasn't much gunk in there to begin with, but as you can see, she's running nice and smooth. If you guys ever looked up how Jacob's chuck works, man, I don't remember the fellow's name, but there's a guy who takes these Jacob's chucks apart, and it's got to be the specific brand, this Jacob's chuck. They are very cool and a really cool design. So, made in the United States.
Get stuff where I know it's supposed to be. Just get things close. Yep, this goes on that side.
See this little rubber grommet goes in here, so that way when it slams up to the top, it doesn't accidentally go BAM! And I think I'm going to put some of my special oil. Special grease, whatever. I'll let this free spin. Yeah. get a little bit of backlash in them gears, but nothing I can do about that. Not quite yet. Need to pull this out. Yowza! Watch it. Don't let it bite you. Drill presses this age, they'll bite you if they get grumpy. Oh yeah. All right, now this key keeps, if this chuck should ever decide that it wants to start spinning, this entire keyway up here is, or this entire sliding portion is held in place by this key. And you just tighten that fella up with not that wrench. Cool. And then you put the auto return on this fella. What it does, support the weight of the drill when you put her down. And then the only thing that these two nuts do is they act as a jam nut against each other and keep this this part from backing off. And they jam against each other so that they don't put any more pressure squeezing this thing. So cool. And we'll adjust this once I finally get it up and it's supporting its own weight. Alright buddy, so if you ever have to take this part off again for whatever reason, so there's this little nut on here. We'll call it a castle nut or spanner nut, but as you can see, so those are standard threads, so righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And then this guy, it's on a tapered shaft, so as soon as you get this nut off, you can either kind of tap it with a hammer to see if it'll break loose, or you could put a wedge underneath of it to kind of pop it up. That's the only way to get to the screws that hold this guy on top of there. Alright, one thing I noticed is as soon as I put this to max tension, I still have a ton of tension left here. And if you can see, the motor has hit the belt guard. So which is preventing it from getting as tight as it needs to be, which is just not much, but it's slightly tighter than this. What I'm going to do is there is a set screw right there. We're going to undo that set screw and push this pulley up so that I can drop the motor down. And that should help this belt last a lot longer. Alright buddy, here she is all cleaned up. This is your Buffalo BDM-58-5S, made in Taiwan. So I'm going to take that as a good sign. We go back to the OG here. This is a Buffalo. 1172 that I've kind of reworked and done some stuff too. Love the handles on it and love it. I do wish it had a table lift like yours. Now, if you can see this guy, where I could put a washer just to kind of clean things up and to make them smoother, I did. And I cleaned up all this mechanism. And then you saw I put you a special set screw in here that has a nylock set screw. And then it had one of these old style grease fittings, but I know how much you have an affinity toward Zerks, so I drilled and tapped that for a standard size Zerk fitting. So the bed is all nice and moves freely. And then when you need to, you lock your table down right here. When you come up to here, you undo this guy, and then there's one on the corresponding side you can undo. And from there, this moves your belt tensioner in and out. And why that's important is if you need to lower it to a different setting, a different speed, you're going to need it loosened up. And tighten that guy up. Yep, you don't want the belt screaming tight, but you want it tight enough. And the other thing I did for you is before these weren't balanced. So I ran a level across the top of here to the top of here. I made sure my table was flat, and I leveled this pulley with the top of this pulley. It's within a 1/16 of an inch over that spread, and that's plenty good enough for one of these old Victor belts. Maintain your original sticker there. As you can see, the handles I cleaned up with a torch. Jacob's chuck I completely rebuilt, and I tightened it up a little bit more so that when you let it go, it'll return. Don't let it slam too much. Now remember, your Jacob's chuck is a tapered fit onto there. So if at any point this thing comes off for some reason, all you gotta do is just take this up there and hit it, and then take a mallet and pop it so that it stays on there. I retained your original placard here. Somehow this thing's in just absolutely great shape. I replaced these two cable ties. I made sure everything going to your motor was nice and tight. And then lastly, you had this old incandescent bulb in there, which still worked, but it's a glass bulb, so that can cause some problems whenever you're working somewhere. So what I did is I put an LED bulb in there that still has a nice soft glow to it, but it's plastic, so if anything shatters or pops up, it's not going to get broken glass right there. And then lastly, as you can see, it runs pretty smooth, and there's maybe just a hair or run out on it. It comes, like I said, with this other Jacob's chuck, which was from something else, obviously, but it does allow you to chuck this chuck within the larger ones so that you can hold smaller drill bits. Your two different size keys, one for the small and one for the big. If I was you, I would recommend putting a lanyard on them. I really like the way this just silly chain worked out, but it's always right where I need it. I put it down there and I drop it, and it's out of the way. This is yours, and I want to make sure that you do what with it that you want to do. Other than that, everything works. Depth gauge here, as you can see, so that'd be 1 inch. If I set that screw right there, 1 inch. But I wouldn't rely on this thing to be 100% perfect. I would rely on either like something you measured with a tape measure. I have checked to make sure everything's grounded so that no little hands can grab onto it and get shocked, and everything's back the way it was, but better. Hey man, I hope it gives you plenty of years of a great service.